Groundhog Day, the age-old tradition of watching Punxsutawney Phil emerge from hibernation and tell a bunch of guys in top hats what the weather's going to be like for the second half of winter. Thousands of people converge at Gobbler's Knob in Pennsylvania every February for this 3-day celebration. With the fun also comes controversy, mostly among professional meteorologists that find Phil's lack of education in the field a bit off-putting. Many have made note of his lack of accuracy, while others enjoy the fun that comes with the tradition. Today we are going off the radar and heading to Gobbler's Knob to learn how this tradition began. We'll talk with a meteorologist that has witnessed and covered Phil's prognostication for the last 22 years. So grab your hot chocolate and join us as we celebrate one of America's oddest and most entertaining holidays, Groundhog Day. I'm meteorologist Emily Gracie, and you're listening to Off the Radar, a production of the National Weather Desk. On the show, we dig deep into topics about weather, climate, the ocean, space, and much more. Our goal is to help you better understand the weather and to love it as much as we do.
Okay, it's time to commit. 2024 is the year for prioritizing yourself. Begin your new smile journey with Byte, and you could start seeing results in just 2 to 3 weeks. Just order your at-home impression kit today for only $14.95 at Byte.com. Byte clear aligners are doctor-directed and delivered to your door. Treatment costs thousands less than braces. Plus, they offer financing options, accept eligible insurance, and you can pay with your HSA FSA. Get 80% off your impression kit when you use code WONDERY at Byte.com. That's BYTE.com. Start your confidence journey today with Byte.
Happy Groundhog Day, everyone. I have to admit, in my years as a broadcast meteorologist, I wasn't always a big fan of Phil. I was always annoyed that anyone would put any stock in his forecast. What does it even mean? 6 more weeks of winter or early spring? That could mean different things in different places. Well, as time has gone on, my attitude has shifted, and a big reason for that is today's guest. Joe Murgo is a fellow meteorologist that also spent many years in local TV. Joe and I both served on the American Meteorological Society's broadcast board together, and he gave a talk at a conference a couple of years ago that inspired me to do this episode. He's also retired from TV, which means I was finally able to interview him because he isn't working for a competing company anymore. So Joe was the chief meteorologist at the TV station in Altoona, Pennsylvania. It's the home market to Punxsutawney, which means he covered this event year after year after year after year. Yep, just like the movie. Well, not exactly like the movie. You'll see. Joe shares all the inside details about what goes on up at Gobbler's Knob. Also some hilarious mishaps that he has witnessed over the years. I do want to point out that at one point in my conversation with Joe, he mentions a, not so alive groundhog being used in a celebration, but I want to make it clear that he is not referring to Punxsutawney Phil. He's talking about a knockoff celebration in another city. In fact, he says Phil is treated very, very well. We're also going to discuss the scientific relevance of Groundhog Day. So you're going to be a Groundhog Day fan by the time this is all over. Enjoy my chat with meteorologist Joe Murgo. Joe Murgo, I'm so happy to have you on today because you are not only a former broadcast meteorologist, but somebody who covered an event like nobody else. You are like the original, what's the guy's name from Groundhog Day?
Yes.
Phil Connors. Okay, yes. You are the original Phil Connors in a real life kind of way. So let's talk about Groundhog Day and kind of the weather implications, the science implications, but I want to start by asking you a little bit about your history with Groundhog Day and how long you covered it and what that was like.
My first year covering it was back in 2002, and I have a streak that continues to go on. So even during COVID, they closed it off, but I've been there. I have, it's impossible. I have the longest streak of covering it on the media. And yes, I'll still be there this year.
Okay, so what's it like? Because we have our preconceived notions, like the movie tells us one thing. Recent years, you see it on TV and it looks like a giant raging party early in the morning. So what is it? What's going on there?
Well, what it is it's nothing like the movie at all. In the movie, he's in this bed and breakfast. He just goes out to a little park downtown and then that's it. So Gobbler's Knob is a couple of miles south of Punxsutawney. You have, in the old days, it really was a free-for-all party. Then when 2001 hit, 9/11, after that, they slowly started building in more security. Now you can't get up there until 2 a.m. And you have to take a bus from downtown Punxsutawney unless you have a special access. And so the crowd usually is downtown and they have different places you could stay. And then they work their way on the bus. And people are there all morning long, just in the cold, dancing, watching the entertainment. And it is a pretty big party, though. Nowadays, I'm sure there's some, let's say, substances of liquid there. I don't really get to see it, but I don't get around the crowd much. But it definitely has changed. And there's family sections and there's fires for people to warm up. And it's just a nice atmosphere. I tell everyone, it's something you gotta do at least once. You've never been yet, have you?
I haven't, but I've also heard people say that about New Year's Eve in Times Square, and I have no desire to do that. Are there bathrooms?
Yes,
okay.
There are. In fact,
always
there's
a concern.
For most people, it's just line of porta potties, but there's plenty. They have amenities, they have first aid, they have security. So there are. You're not out in the middle of the woods in the middle of nowhere. You don't have to rely on Depends like you do in New Year's. Where right. I mean, yeah. You can get to the spots. Now, I will say I limit my water consumption early in the day because once I'm in position at 3 a.m, I'm usually in that position till about 9. No bathroom breaks, nothing. I'm usually one station, another station, and just constantly doing updates.
So how do you prepare? You say you dehydrate for one. Like, do you have hand warmers? How do you dress?
The biggest thing is you do have to make sure you dress appropriately because if it's a cold morning, that cold gets to you. No matter what, I'm a skier, so I have plenty of gear, but the cold will get to you. And I've seen several professional broadcasters, even nationwide, and that they look drunk at the end. They're not drunk. It's just the cold is slowing down their processes a good bit. And that's the biggest thing. And you just have to dress appropriately. Now, if you show up too close to the end, you're way in the back.
So if you've been doing this for 20 years, I'm sure you've seen lots of different types of weather on Groundhog Day. Any extremes that stand out to you?
There were a couple of really cold ones in the early 2000s. And ironically, it was one time that my whole family decided to go. The worst is when there's a little bit of rain and it's cold. That's the worst kind of weather. But recently, it's been pretty mild. Now, I will say my gear gets better year to year. I'm pretty comfortable, but there's been a couple of years ago, I remember I had to strip some layers. It was that mild. So, wow. Yeah, definitely a different world. Now, this year, we'll see. The weather pattern's breaking. So we may get back to, we're going to warm, but we may get back to cold.
Okay, so take me through the process itself of the groundhog seeing its shadow. Are we still relying on that? I'm curious about kind of the history and when things transition to there's like a scroll and who are the guys in the top hats? Explain it all to me.
Well, it all started in the 1800s in Pennsylvania. And even before then, I'll even back up even before then, it was a German tradition over in Europe. And they used to use a hibernating hedgehog. Well, when the Germans migrated to Pennsylvania, we had a high German population. So what they did is, well, we don't have hedgehogs here. They found a groundhog similar enough. And in the late 1800s, they came out for the first time. And every year since then, and the tradition really didn't grow that much until the movie. And that's where you went from, it grew to maybe hundreds to absolute thousands there. But the scrolls, that's been going on for a long time. And what Phil proclaims is he actually speaks in Groundhogese.
Oh, I'm not fluent. Tell me more.
Yes, he only speaks that language, and only the president who's holding the cane. And if you notice, they rap on his stump before they bring him up. And holding that cane can understand Groundhogese, and he picks one of two scrolls, one that says that he sees a shadow, one that says he doesn't. And, Phil has always been there ever since the 1800s.
Wow, Phil is old.
Yes, he drinks a magical elixir every July. That's how he stays young, Phil and Phyllis.
Gonna need that recipe.
Same here. So, and I will say there are rumors, I can't confirm or deny that there was one time that there was another groundhog that they weekend and Bernie'd it.
No.
Yes. I heard, I'm not going to say who, I'm not going to, but they had a little issue with their groundhog not quite being, and I do want to get this out because you're probably going to hear it. He's treated pretty well. A lot of people will sit there and go, that's so mean, the groundhog. Well, first of all, he is a lot more comfortable than I am on Groundhog Day. And I'm right in front of his stump, seeing his little light and heat on the inside of his stump, and I'm outside in the cold. But they treat him so nice. He has a habitat in the library. That's his home, and with him and Phyllis, and it's a museum there. And they do treat him pretty nice.
I have not heard concerns about that, but maybe it's just the circles I run in. I do, however, run in the circles of meteorologists that are like angry about Groundhog Day. They're angry that anybody puts any stock in a groundhog for a seasonal forecast. So you've kind of always spoken on the opposite side of things. I'm like, this is a fun tradition. So can you address that, the people that are very critical of Phil?
Well, first of all, I am first and foremost science. I still teach meteorology for one of the campuses at Penn State. I am science true and true. I now work in the climate and weather risk field. First of all, who is totally putting all their stock in on what this one tradition is? Second of all, why do I celebrate it? Well, first of all, I also am one of those people who don't like the darkness. And, and seasonal affective disorder is a big issue. You know what the interesting thing about Groundhog Day and why they picked that date? It is the midpoint between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. So that means you're now getting into that period where the day length really strengthens. It is a turning of the seasons. And that is a very important date to me when it comes to daylight. And that it does have a significance there where they picked that day.
Yeah, you're right. Because, I grew up in Connecticut and the winter felt very never ending. And Groundhog Day was always kind of like this day of hope, regardless of what the outcome was. It was like this day of hope where we had something all of a sudden to look forward to, because that time between, January 1 and February 1 is kind of like a bleak time, and it makes us think, okay, spring is right around the corner. Either way, it's going to happen this year. It's just a little bit longer. That's a really good point.
It's the Super Bowl of weather. You get the whole world interested in weather on a day.
And in a good way, not in like a traumatic hurricane or snowstorm kind of way.
Yes. And so to me, it's a celebration day, more of celebrating weather and the changing seasons, and less about the actual message.
Speaking of the outcome, what's Phil's accuracy like? Do you have any numbers for me on like how he actually does, or is there any concrete evidence on that?
So Phil's accuracy, it's a never lose forecast. 6 more weeks of winter, no definition of winter, and spring right around the corner. So how can you ever prove him wrong? It really is a loose definition. So in the court of law, could you argue that Phil is 100% correct? Yes, because there is no true definition of winter. There's no true definition of spring, because really spring is just a battle between winter and summer, and eventually summer will win no matter how miserable it is.
So even if there isn't like scientific accuracy in Groundhog Day, is there scientific relevance kind of beyond this whole, it's the halfway point here in the season? Is there any other scientific relevancy here?
Well, yes. Often you're talking about a long wave trough or ridge that locks in for about 4 or 6 weeks at a time. At the midway point, if the weather is clear, most likely, and mild, most likely you're in a ridge. So he would see his shadow And therefore, given the length of when cold air can hold on, odds are the pattern will change again, and it will still feel harsh winter-like, and there's still significant cold. However, if you're locked in that trough, odds are it is going to warm up sometime and then, maybe less than a month. By the time it would go back again into that long wave trough, the amount of cold air is gone and the sun's getting too strong. So there is a little scientific, if you think about it and break it down to the overall weather pattern. Because you think about it, in winter, you don't usually go lock in. You go from a cold pattern to a warm pattern there are some long wave shifts.
So what do you think for this year? Any predictions yourself?
Oh, well, he will always try to find his shadow because of what I always say about spring, that people just always unhappy with the weather. So it's like 80% of the time he'll find a way of finding a shadow. And it's interesting because people will sit there and say, oh, yeah, it's all the camera lights. And the lights up there, they actually turn a lot of them down. But he has a mind of his own. I'd seen it clear as a bell, and he didn't see a shadow. And I've seen it as cloudy could be, and somehow he did see it. So, I do think that I used to joke that they used to watch my long-range forecast and then help Phil. He used to watch my long-range forecast, and then he would make a decision off of that.
Right, because, Punxsutawney, a lot of people don't even know where this is. And I mean, if you grew up in, say, California, this may be completely irrelevant to you. You don't even know where this is. So can you explain where in Pennsylvania this is, and then your TV market and just how small that is, and how it was the hometown TV market for this city?
Yes. Yeah, I worked in the Altoona, Johnstown television market, which includes Jefferson County, where Punxsutawney is located. It is about an hour northwest of Altoona and about an hour and a half northeast of Pittsburgh. Off the beaten path. There's no major interstate there, and that's why it's really important to the town. And this is a big boost to their economy every year. So it's real important to the small little town, but it is in the middle of nowhere. And it's even outside of that town too. It's kind of hysterical. So, the Altoona Johnstown market is the home market for Phil. And that's how I got to cover it for all those years.
Okay. So 20 plus years. We've talked about kind of the weather you've seen in that time. Anything else that you've seen? Any weird things happen or crazy things happen that stand out to you? Some fun memories of covering this for over 2 decades?
Let me think of all the ones that are safe to say.
You can tell me the unsafe ones too. I'll cut them out if they're too inappropriate. Well,
there was one governor. Phil Groundhog have very sharp teeth, and it's not a domestic animal. Phil does have changing moods. One governor, they warned and they said, whatever you do, governor, don't try to pet the groundhog. And the first thing that he did when he got up on stage, he reached out for it. And thank goodness, I think Bill Dealey was the handler at that time. Thank goodness his reflexes were fast enough, because the governor almost lost a finger that day. A lot of times you'll see them handling him with black gloves, and there's fencer steel mesh gloves underneath. So this, the teeth are very sharp. There's another time that they lifted Phil up, and they always hold him up and do this to the crowd. It was one time he had to go.
Oh.
Actually, they didn't turn in front of me, but he did shower up front.
Oh, no. They got wet? They got peed on?
Some people got peed on. And
that's not what you want on a cold day.
No, it's not what you want even on a warm day. And another time, Phil almost got away, and it was just it was a tense moment, because he slipped and he fell, and his mouth went to the area on the handler's body where you're hoping someone doesn't take a bite. Yes.
Has the crowd ever done anything weird? Has there ever been fights?
Absolutely. There's always, now one time there was someone from an MTV show that was there back when MTV was doing a lot of shows and wild things. It was Viva La Bam. He was going to storm the stage. And it was interesting because of the maneuvering, how everyone heard it and was trying to prevent that. There was one time this woman came in just a fur bikini. Some of the outfits that people wear. I mean, there's a guy, he has a different groundhog beanie baby he adds to his hat every year. It's very interesting. And you see people from everywhere. I've run into, you mentioned California, it doesn't mean much, but I've run into people from Japan, Australia, Hawaiians. It's like a bucket list. I even one time interviewed and talked to a South African.
They must think, like, what a strange American tradition.
Yes. And it's interesting because he does get his picture, because I'll know because people will see it. And it's in newspapers all around the world. Joe gets his proclamation. And especially if it's a really rough weather pattern around the time, he tends to get even more headlines.
What can you tell me about the inner circle? How do you get in the inner circle? Are women allowed? It seems kind of elite. It
is. There have been conversations. To be honest, I've met a lot of the women family of the inner circle, and they're like, that's okay. We don't want to stay up all night anyway, because they work constantly. It's a group of people who their responsibility is to carry on tradition, and it's a 365-day a year job. It is, you do have to work your way in, and it requires a certain amount of volunteer hours, and then they'll retire and they still are part of it. But it is a small club. I was so honored the one time. I'm an honorary member of the inner circle.
I was going to ask, do you have any aspirations to be in the inner circle given your history?
Not the full inner circle. I'm just happy enough to be an honorary member, and I will tell you, I love those guys. Those guys are great. They really do a lot. And the Governor Shapiro, came last year, right after he was elected to office, and he and his family loved the tradition. And they just brought the inner circle, and they invited me, and we all went to the governor's mansion 100 days before Groundhog Day, and we had a celebration. And Phil was there too.
Are there a lot of pregame events?
There are people who go there every day of the year just to see it. When you walk around Punxsutawney, there's all these small little groundhogs all over the place. Well, small. They're about 4 or 5 foot tall statues all over town. So people go there all the time, and maybe not even go for the day itself. But some people will go up 2-3 days ahead of time and will stay. And good luck in getting a hotel room around there. It's interesting because Punxsutawney doesn't have much in the way of lodging. I was really lucky for the longest time because they allowed me. I say no one's up at Gobbler's Knob, but for a while, for about a half dozen years, I would have an RV in the back, and I would sleep on Gobbler's Knob.
Oh, wow.
With my crew, yes.
How convenient.
It's so interesting because I would go to sleep, and it's all empty patch of woods, and you wake up and there's tens of thousands of people.
Yeah. Joe, is there anything else you want to add about Groundhog Day? This has been really fun.
No, just again, it's worth it for someone to go once. It's a fun thing. Do it once, but just have a great attitude and prepare for the cold.
Joe Murgo, thank you so much. Best of luck this year. 23rd year?
It'll be my 23rd in a row.
Wow. Congratulations. This is very exciting. Off the Radar is a production of the National Weather Desk. Make sure you're following the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes publish every Tuesday morning. If you know someone that's feeling kind of so-so about Groundhog Day and wants to learn more about it, make sure you share this episode with them. I'd also love you to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Let us know what you think of the show. You can also give me some ideas for future episodes. Special thanks to Joe Murgo for his insider information today. I'm meteorologist Emily Gracie. Make it a great day.